Welcome back. Today we're going to be working on equivalent exponent expressions. Our content objective is students will be able to compare expressions with exponents and find equivalent expressions. Language objective is students will be able to discuss ways of breaking apart expressions and then simplifying the expression using mathematical properties. Language objective is, why am I learning this? It's important for real-world problems like predicting population growth. So first and foremost, let's go over the different properties. So whenever we are multiplying the bases, and again, you need to make sure the bases are the same, what we could do is go ahead and just add the exponents together. So here, raising the 4 to the 3 plus 2, which is going to give you 4 to the 5th. Here, again, since the bases are the same, I can go ahead and add the exponent since we're multiplying these two bases together. So I'm going to do a negative 2 plus a negative 3. So this is going to give me 4 to the negative 5th, which needs to be simplified one step further as 1 over 4 to the 5th. Okay, now what if we're dividing with the same bases? What do we do? In this case, what we're going to do is first write the exponent down. Since we are dividing, we're going to go ahead and subtract the exponent. So 6 minus 4. It's going to give me a 5 to the 6 minus 4 is 2. So that's going to be 5 squared. Same thing here. Our base is a 7. We're going to go ahead and subtract the exponent. So that's a negative 9 minus a negative 6. You have to be very careful. If you go ahead and add the opposite, you're going to end up with 7 to the, let's see, there's more negatives, there's 3 more negatives. I would take it one step further and say that's basically 1 over 7 cubed. So please make sure you're not leaving your answer with a negative exponent. Typically, on especially your homework, we want you to simplify the exponents using positive exponents. Okay, and last but not least is what happens when we raise a power to a power. What happens to the exponents? Well, we are actually going to multiply the exponents. So this is going to be 3 to the 2 times 4. 2 times 4 is 8. So we're going to go ahead and say that's 3 to the 8th power. For the next example, same idea. Since it's a power raised to another power, we're going to go ahead and multiply the exponent. So it's going to be a 6 raised to the negative 2nd times a negative 3. A negative times a negative is a positive, so that's going to be 6 raised to the 6th power. Okay, so hopefully now we remember if we have bases raised to exponents, if we are multiplying, we add them. If we're dividing them, we subtract the exponents, and when we're raising it from power to power, we're going to multiply the exponents. Now, for number 1, it says Madison tried to simplify an expression step by step. Here is the given expression, and here are the steps. Your job is to look through the steps and try to find if she made any mistakes, and if so, where did she make that mistake in which step? So here are the different steps. And here are your options. She could have made a mistake in step 1, 2, 3, or there's a possibility that she didn't make any mistakes at all. So go ahead, pause the video, take a look at the different steps and see if she made a mistake or not. So here, hopefully you recognize that she made a mistake in step 1. Why step 1? Well, if you focus on the inside, you're multiplying 6 to the 3rd times 6 to the negative 3rd. So according to the properties, you should have added the exponents, which should have given you a negative, not negative 6, a 6 raised to the 3 plus negative 3 power, which would have given you 6 to the 0, not 6 to the negative 9th. So that's where the mistake occurred, was in step number 1. Okay, so now let's take a look at Chris's work. Chris tried to simplify an expression step by step. He has 5 to the negative 6 over 5 to the negative 4th. Here are the different steps. And here are our options. Did he make a mistake in step 1, 2, 3, or did he not make any mistakes at all? So at this point, I would like you to go ahead and pause the video, examine the steps to see if you made a mistake or not. Okay, so let's see. Hopefully you recognize that he didn't make a single mistake at all. Everything was done correctly. Since we are dividing the bases, you went ahead and subtracted the exponents. And here, if you add the opposite, you would see that -6 plus +4 would give you -2, which then needs to be rewritten as 1/5 squared. Okay, what about number 3? Natalie tried to simplify an expression step by step. She was simplifying 6 cubed times 6 to the 4th all raised to the 2nd power. Here are the steps, and here are our options. Our job is to figure out where did Natalie make a mistake, if any. So go ahead and pause the video, examine the work, and see where you can find the mistake, if there is one. Okay, so hopefully you recognize that Natalie made a mistake in step number 2. What was wrong with step number 2? Well, if you look here, 3 plus 4 gives me 7. So technically what you would have had was 6 to the 7th raised to the 2nd power. And because it's a power raised to another power, it should have been 6 to the 7 times 2 instead of plus 2. So the mistake occurred at step number 2. Okay, so now let's take a look at Fred's work. It says Fred tried to simplify an expression step by step. So 3/4 raised to -3rd. First, he has this step, and he went over to second step and third step, so they kind of go diagonal. So once again, here are our choices. I want you to go ahead and pause the video and find the mistake if he made a mistake at all. Okay, so let's see. Hopefully you recognize that his mistake occurred in step number 3. Why? Because this expression here, this fraction, is not yet simplified. We normally do not write fractions within a fraction. Okay, so the mistake occurred in step number 3 because it's incomplete. Okay, it says here, number 5, which expressions are equivalent to 1/4 times 1/4 times 1/4? So now we're no longer trying to figure out where the mistakes are occurring. We're actually going to look for equivalent expressions to the expressions that are given to us. So here are our choices. Typically what I do is I look at the problem and I see if it can also be represented in the same way. So in this case, 4 to the -3rd could be represented as 1/4 cubed, which is essentially the same thing as 1/4 times 1/4 times 1/4, because if you think about it, this can also be rewritten as, let's see, where can I have some space? 1 times 1 times 1, which is 1/4 times 4 times 4, which is 4 cubed. So definitely A is equivalent. Okay. Let's see, how about B? Well, this is essentially 1/4 times 1/4 for the 1/4 squared times 1/4. So is this the same as what's given here? Absolutely. So B is also equivalent. What about C? Anything to the 0 power is going to be 1, so I'm just going to call this a 1 now. And here, 4 to the 4th times raised to the 2nd power is going to become 4 to the 8th power. And here, since it's 4 times 4 squared, I'm going to add the exponent. So that's going to give me 4/3. Now, 4 to the 8th over 4/3 is 4 to the 5th. That is not equivalent to what I have here, which is about 1/4 cubed. Okay, what about this? Here, since the bases are the same, I'm going to go ahead and just add these two exponents together, which should give me 4 cubed over, let's see here. Since we're raising to another power, we're going to multiply the exponent, so that's going to be 4 to the 6th power. Then you would go ahead and subtract. So you're going to have 4 to the 3 minus 6, which would give you 4 to the -3rd. Here, remember, this is already equivalent to A, and if it's equivalent to A, this must be equivalent as well. But you could have just taken that one step further and said that's basically 1/4 cubed. So I would say D is also equivalent. So definitely it's not going to be option E because we already have A, B, and D as equivalent expressions. Okay, so there's no right or wrong way to do this. You kind of can either simplify and just see, could it mean the same thing? Could you essentially evaluate it to get the same exact number? So now let's take a look at number 6. Which expressions are equivalent to 1/4 to the 6th? So here are our options. 4 to the 6th is just 4 to the 6th times 4 to the 0, which I can call 1, would just give you 4 to the 6. So even though it looks very similar to 1 over 4 to the 6, these are not equivalent. Okay, so I'm not going to pick A. What about B? Well, here, 4 to the 8th over 4 squared, since the bases are the same and we're dividing, I can go ahead and subtract the exponent. So 8 minus 2, which is going to give me 4 to the 6. Once again, I know it looks very similar, but it's not the same as 1 over 4 to the 6. So B is not equivalent. Okay, so let's look at letter C. So in this case, again, you should be asking yourself that question. Should I do exponents first or parentheses first? Well, according to the order of operations, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses is definitely addressed first. So we're going to do what's inside the parentheses. I like to simplify the numerator, then the denominator if applicable. So here, to simplify the numerator, this is essentially 1. 1 times 4 is just 4. Here, since we are multiplying the bases, I'm going to go ahead and just add these exponents. So 4 to the negative 1 plus 5 squared. Still simplifying the inside, that's going to be 4 over 4 to the 4th power. We're going to square that. So now that's going to leave me, there's so many different ways. Some of you can view it as 1 over 4 cubed. Some of you may view that as negative 4 to negative 3rd power. So again, there's no right or wrong way. Okay, some of you can still get the same answers going a different method. So here I'm going to go ahead and square this, which would give me 1 over 4 to the 6. So guess what? That's definitely equivalent to this. So C is an option. What about this one? Just to give myself a little bit more space, I'm just going to go ahead and erase the work I have here. Let's see. Again, we have to do what's inside the parentheses first. So this is going to become 4 to the 3 plus 4, which is 7, raised to the negative 2nd power, over here, since it's being multiplied, we're going to add these exponents. So that's 4 to the negative 2nd plus negative 6. So now I'm going to be left with, just giving myself more space, I'm going to write it over here, 4 to the negative 14th, because I multiplied 7 times negative 2, over 4 to the, well, negative 2 plus negative 6, like parentheses there, it's going to give me a negative 8. So to finish this off, I'm going to do 4 to the negative 14 minus a negative 8. If you add the opposite, you're going to end up with 4 to the negative 6, which could be rewritten as 1 over 4 to the 6. So D is definitely also equivalent. So it can't be E, of course, since we picked C and D. Okay, so now number 7. At this point, what I would like you to do is go ahead and pause the video and try this one on your own. Determine whether or not 8 to the negative 3rd is equivalent to any of these given options. Okay, so let's see how well we did. A, well, first of all, this is negative 8 rewritten 3 times, so this would be negative 8 cubed. Is that the same as 8 to the negative 3rd power? No. Be very careful. Some students are just going to recognize negatives and see that, oh, there's an 8 and a 3. But it really does make a difference. This is 8 raised to the negative 3rd power, and this is negative 8 raised to the 3rd power. Two totally different things. So A is not equivalent. Here, since they are the same base are being divided, you can go ahead and subtract the exponent. So 8 to the negative 5th minus a negative 2. If you add the opposite, you should end up with 8 to the negative 3rd. Guess what? Normally, I would go ahead and say this is 1 over 8 to the 3rd. But because they're asking me if it's equivalent to this, I can stop and say, yeah, it definitely is. What about C? Here, 3 to the 0 power is just 1. I know normally you don't do anything when the exponents, your bases aren't the same, which is true. But in this case, because 3 is raised to the 0 power, I know that is 1. So I went ahead and did that. So now you're going to be left with 8 squared over 8 to the 6th power, which you can then go ahead and use the property. Since it's dividing, we're going to subtract the exponent. So that's 8 to the 2 minus 6, which is going to give me 8 to the negative 4th power. Right away, I can go ahead and determine that these are not equivalent. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate C. Now for option D, okay, once again, you want to make sure you simplify what's within the parentheses first. To save myself some time, I'm going to go ahead and recognize, hey, a to the negative third and a to the negative third, I can definitely reduce that down. A to the negative third divided by a to the negative third is 1. A to the negative third divided by a to the negative third would be 1, which just leaves me with 8 to the negative second raised to the fourth power. Now, since it's power to power, I can go ahead and multiply the exponents to save myself some time. So that's 8 raised to the negative 2 times 4, which gives me 8 to the negative 8. Again, normally I would typically turn this into a positive exponent, but since they're asking me to compare it to a to the negative third, I can go ahead and say that it is not equivalent to d. And it's definitely not none, so I'm just going to go ahead and say that only b is equivalent to the given expression. Okay, so now taking a look at number 8, it says which expressions are equivalent to 7 to the negative third over 7 to the negative first. So here are our options. Let's go ahead and take a look to find out which ones are equivalent. So let's see. First, typically, I would go ahead and simplify this a little bit so I can get an idea of what this would be. So I'm going to go ahead and use the properties, and since we're dividing, I'm going to go ahead and subtract the exponents. So here we have 7 to the negative third minus a negative 1, which is going to leave us with 7 to the, here I'm going to add the opposites, which is going to leave me to negative second. So this would be an equivalent expression, or you can see it as 1 over 7 squared. So these are the different types that I'm going to be keeping my eye out on. So right away, A is equivalent. That was one of the choices that are definitely equivalent. So I'm going to go ahead and list A. Here, B is also definitely equivalent to the second option. So I'm going to go ahead and say B is 1 as well. What about C? Here, I'm going to have to simplify what I have. First, simplifying the numerator. Since we're multiplying, we can go ahead and use properties and add these exponents. So 6 plus a negative 6. And here, since we are raising it from one power to another, we can go ahead and use the properties and multiply these exponents together. So this is going to leave me with 7 to the 0 power over 7 to the, let's see, negative second. Okay, which is actually going to leave me with 1 over 7 to the negative second. Now be very careful. I know some of the numbers look very close and similar. However, this is not the same as my first option nor my second option. So please understand, though C may look a little deceiving, it may seem as though it is equivalent, it is not. Okay, now let's take a look at this one. I'm going to have to simplify the numerator. So here, just to save myself some space, I'm just going to tell you, since it's multiplying, I'm going to go ahead and add these exponents, giving me 7 to the 4th power. And here, since we are multiplying, we can go ahead and also add these exponents. Negative 8 plus 6 is a negative 2. So now this can be rewritten as 7 to the 4 minus negative 2. Add the opposites, and you're going to get 7 to the 6. So D is definitely not equivalent. So I'm just going to say that the only ones that are equivalent is A and B. Okay, so last but not least, it says which expressions are equivalent to 1/12 times 1/12 times 1/12 times 1/12. So here are our different options. Please go ahead and pause the video and try these examples on your own and see which ones you get. Okay, so let's see which ones you agreed on. So real quick, I can recognize this as 1/12 raised to the 4th power, something along the lines of that. So for A, I can go ahead and rewrite this as 12 to the negative 4th, since negative 2 times 2 is negative 4, which can be rewritten as 1 over 12 to the 4th. Now this is equivalent to the given expression. Why? Because if you wrote this out, 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 is 1, and this 12 written 4 times can be expressed as such. So A is definitely equivalent. What about B? This is 1/12 squared plus 1/12 squared. Now some of you may be tricked by this one. Okay, why? Because you're thinking, look, there's going to be a set here and another set here, and there's 4 all together. However, notice here, we're adding them. We're not multiplying them. So this is not the same thing as A or any of these. So though B also is very tricky, this is not equivalent because unless this was multiplication. If it was, then I can go ahead and say that it is. But because it says plus, it is not equivalent. Now let's take a look at C. I'm going to go ahead and simplify what I have here, which is going to be 12 to the negative 10th. Over here is going to be 12 to the negative 6th power, which I can rewrite as 12 to the negative 10 minus a negative 6. If you add the opposite, you're going to get 12 to the negative 4th, which can definitely be rewritten as 1 over 12 to the 4th, so C is an option. Now just to clear things up so we have a little bit more space, let's take a look at D. Again, let's simplify the inside first. Numerator separate, denominator separate. So here the numerator is going to be 12 to the negative 10th because I'm adding those two exponents. And the denominator is going to be 12 to the negative 12th. And this is all still squared. Now simplifying this, we're going to have 12 to the negative 10 minus a negative 12. This whole thing is still squared, which is going to give you 12 to the, let's see, add the opposite, 12 to the second raised to the second power, which is 12 to the 4th power. So unfortunately, this is not the same as 1 over 12 raised to the 4th power or 1 over 12 to the 4th power. I'm going to go ahead and say that D is not equivalent. Then of course E isn't going to be an option. And my answer is just A and C. So that is actually going to conclude our lesson for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, until next time, bye.